DevOps from a product manager's perspective with Christina Rudolph.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome back to the show and Happy New Year, Happy 2020 again. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your humble host. Make sure to check out www.azuredevops.show for past episodes and show notes. And just probably at the end of this week, if you're listening to this podcast fresh, I'm teaching another class of my .NET DevOps Bootcamp. So you can try to get in, but you probably have to look for the next time. So Christina Rudolph is actually a product manager right here at ClearMeasure, but she has had a really awesome career at Accenture and Safe to Save, among others. And I'm excited to get your take, Christina, on DevOps from a product manager's perspective. And we're not going to talk tech at all in this podcast, but how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeffrey. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And so if you wouldn't mind, just give a quick background of what your progression in your various software roles have been, because you've worked with a lot of developers, I think, right?
I really have. When I started my career, I had the great opportunity to dive into custom IT implementations. I did quite a few years in the oil industry, soup to nuts, major project modernizations. It was right around the time of Enron. So trading risk management was the top is a concern in the oil industry, and being able to get on the ground at the very beginning of projects and see everything soup to nuts from the time of design, development, build, testing, and training. I fell in love with the process. After my time in the oil industry, I got to move on with Accenture into aerospace and defense and do a lot of the same, realizing that, it was coming to realize that it doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing. The entire development operations process is done well, can bring a team to truly succeed and really meet deadlines, enhance the quality, meeting ultimately those business requirements are set upon you. Most recently, before I came here to ClearMeasure, I had the joy of working in the app world, startup app, Safe to Save. It's a distracted driving app, and that's where I got to serve as the VP of operations. But I think the thing I love the most is getting to be a part of everything from understanding what our customers are going to want, how we're going to grow an app, getting that to the developers, getting those modifications and enhancements rolled out as quickly as possible, and seeing the immediate growth that could come from that. So that's a little bit about my journey to land here.
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much, there's so many guests that we have on the show that talk about things that are really technical in nature or the latest in tools. And I think tools are going to continue to come and go. And 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it'll be a different mix of tools and technologies that we'll be talking about. But there's so much human in the process of shipping software that I think there's a lot of elements that probably don't change from decade to decade. And, from, I think, 2 decades ago, like you mentioned, some of those Accenture projects. I bet you some of the challenges 2 decades ago are pretty similar to today, or am I wrong?
You're right. You really cannot change that human factor. I like to break things down, and Clear Measure does this as well, into two different factors. You've got individuals that are trying to do something new. They have an idea. There's a visionary leading the cause there, and they're trying to create something that is completely new, but they have to translate that down into business and technical requirements. On the other hand, you may go into some sort of modernization type project where you have individuals who do a job. They do a job today the way they know how and the way they were trained to. And a lot of times for them to think about how to do that job differently is difficult. Change is hard. Change is not the norm for the majority of people in business. However, as software evolves and there's better solutions out there and different tools that can be used, you truly understand that you have to get to a point to embrace that change and where you need to be headed to. So that human aspect never goes away, from the part of defining what actually we need to accomplish for the business, what types of reporting or metrics or day-to-day duties that an individual might have that need to be captured in those requirements, and then translating those into a new software, new technical requirements, and ensuring that it's translated correctly so that we can produce business results in the end.
Yeah. Most of the topics here in the podcast really are targeted at developers or lead engineers and architects, and we don't talk enough about the interface points with the people that surround the technical part of the DevOps process. But from that perspective, you've worked with so many developers, whether it be estimation or testing or just defining requirements. What if there's a developer listening? What do you need from a development team? And let's take the front end of the project when you're in your mind, you have a clear vision of this is what we need the system to do. And of course, we need the developers to make it so. And then, of course, we need to ask the developers, well, how long is it going to take? When are you going to be done? And that interaction can sometimes be challenging. So from your perspective, what makes that go well? What can developers do to help the non-technical people involved in their organization?
Honestly, if developers are able to understand a little bit behind the business that they're trying to impact, you'll have developers of all different levels. And so if they can have a grasp of just overall business concept that they're trying to accomplish, that helps because that bridges the communication. The second thing I would say is that a developer can clearly communicate. If they can clearly communicate how they can accomplish something or what it takes to bring a really clear, concise solution. And this is a very random example, but just this week I was dealing with the ability for someone to click on a website, and this is very simple, click on a website and make it make sense to the person that is clicking on there that they truly just needed to apply for a position. And when that button, all we needed was a button, and a developer can produce that quickly. Do you want it in the form of a button? Do you want it in the form of a report? Do you want it in the form of, metric? And there was so much misunderstanding going on in between, the person who had the requirements and the person that could produce and develop that simple solution that really, if the developer can say, here are the options, and this is what we're capable of doing, it kind of triggers for that business person to get out of their mindset where they might have been pigeonholed a little bit and think, wow, there's a different way to do this. And most often, a simpler way to do this.
That's a good point. If the requester of a software feature says, hey, give me this capability, and the developer tries to jump straight to a solution, that could be missing the opportunity to just present some options and then have a two-stage process that kind of puts the maybe business owner in control.
Very true. Very true. Developers have a way of producing options that a lot of people don't even know are out there. And so developers are cutting edge. They're in their job because they love bringing solutions, cutting edge solutions to the forefront. And so making sure that people know what they're capable of, that really enhances the business.
Well, that sounds like a good tip for somebody who has hired developers and maybe who is paying for the software project. When they give requirements, they're essentially giving the concept or the objective that they're trying to accomplish. And that could be a good tip to explain what they're trying to accomplish. And then instead of asking the developer to estimate right away, which of course the developer would then have to, in their mind, have some type of technical design and approach. But instead of asking for an estimate, maybe the business owner, the product owner could ask for what the options are, what feasible options are likely to get the job done. And then if there's 3 or 4, if there's more, say, okay, well, generally ballpark, how long is each one going to take? And then if there's one that takes 15 minutes, maybe that's good enough.
Yeah. A lot of times, and I'll say this just from running operations in a number of places, is there's typically a really easy solution. There's a medium solution and one that could be really overthought. You never know necessarily how important one requirement might be. I think it's always important to truly say this is a critical piece or not as critical, or we require a lot of detail associated with it or not a lot of detail, because that could just simplify the requirements and what the development team needs to do right there.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software engineering firm and Microsoft Gold partner, empowering development teams to be their best. ClearMeasure equips developers with the DevOps tools, methods, and automation necessary to focus on building their applications, rather than wrestling with builds, deployments, or environments. Click clear-measure.com to see whether a DevOps implementation is for you.
Some quick announcements before we get back to the show. For anyone using Azure DevOps Services, Octopus Deploy, or Redgate SQL Change Automation, or any mix of .NET DevOps tools and platforms, I'm offering free inspections. In my work at ClearMeasure, I have a 30-point DevOps inspection that looks at 30 distinct points across the 7 key areas of a DevOps environment. So just go ahead and email me at jeffrey@clear-measure.com. That's JEFFREY. If you'd like to take advantage of that and like me to take a look at your DevOps environment. And then on estimating, it seems like the age-old question, when are you going to be done? Or how long is this going to take? The industry, as an industry, we still struggle in aggregate. But it seems like that question was probably relevant a long time ago. I mean, the industry, I think, really started in 1959. At least, Fred Brooks has a lot of writings that harken all the way back to software projects at that time. And how to estimate and plan projects was a challenge then. Why can't we solve that?
It is going to continue to be a problem, but we have to take a moment and explore what tools are out there to help us make that easier. As software changes, as there's so many options that exist, you have to hone in and on the pieces that are truly going to help your team work well. There are some great solutions out there, and Jeffrey, you could probably talk to some of those, but some top-notch solutions that almost break down the steps and how long it's going to take in a way that you truly can give a proper estimation. So I know you're a fan, Jeffrey? Tell me.
Well, there's one.
You're always on the forefront of the tools. And so, you know.
Well, it's funny that my answer doesn't actually mention any tool under the sun, but it's more of a technique and kind of a math principle. So for you math geeks out there, there's a principle of large numbers, and in statistics, this can be relevant as well. If you're doing a opinion poll, and if you poll 5 people or 10 people, that result is going to have a lot more error in it than if you poll 1 million people. And there's a spectrum. So the law of large numbers has a lot of impacts. And same thing with estimation. If we ask how long is this project going to take, and we've broken up the project into 10 large system capabilities, and we try to estimate each of those 10 capabilities, we're going to get some answer. But if we break up each of the 10 capabilities into individually implementable tasks, and we have 100 or 200 individual things to estimate, summing all of those smaller estimates it's going to be a lot more accurate than summing maybe just the 10. And so that's the law of large numbers. And whether you do it in a project tracking system, or whether you do it in an Excel spreadsheet, or whether you do it with number 2 pencil, doesn't really matter. But breaking something down into as many pieces as you can think of, and then estimating the smallest granular pieces and then adding them all back together, that tends to yield the most accurate estimate.
It really does. And I always used to refer to this as like a top-down and a bottom-up type approach of estimating. And, top-down, you're looking at those top tiers that you can break a project down into, and you can kind of get into, the elements of design and build and test, or, if you're actually doing the development, as an overall look, you can get kind of a high level estimate. But what I love is that we are getting to a place where you can do a true bottom up planning, where you can get into the details that you're talking about of how long does it take to produce a specific, amount of code and test. And as you are doing iterations, having those, you're going to get your testing cycles down, and you can make them make just that process better, so that all in all, it builds upon itself, but you have something to go on to use for your estimation.
Putting those two concepts together, it seems like those are the biggest challenges when interfacing with the development team. And one is knowing what to ask for and the options to ask to be developed. And then the second is managing how long it's going to take and just getting realistic numbers from the get-go. Because nobody likes being halfway through a software project and then, oh, guess what? It's going to take twice as long. I mean, I think a lot of people paying for software projects, don't they feel trapped when they get halfway in and then, all of a sudden now the project costs twice as much? I mean, what do you do in that case? Well,
and at that point, usually people look at their CFO or their superiors and they say, well, it's IT. You just can't estimate it. And, they fall back on some sort of excuse like, well, we have to get this done. We have to have this system. But in reality, there's methods out there that help us to think through those projects in a smart way. And that is kind of the key of making sure that you're on top of those concepts, whittling out everything else. This is not new. We know this. We know how to approach these projects. And so zoning in on that and not letting anything else kind of get in our way and in our eyesight, we stay laser focused on what you're trying to do. Keep it simple, even when it comes down to those requirements coming in and what you're trying to produce.
So this is gold. want to hone in on what you said. You said, this is not new. We know this. And yet in the last 6-7 years, the stats, at least publicly available, is that there's twice as many developers in the industry now as there was 6-7 years ago. So we have just tons of people who are coming in relatively fresh, and there's no way that the universities can really teach everything that's necessary. So how do they learn this? If we collectively as the industry, and where should people go? What techniques should people be looking up and learning on their own so that they don't miss out on maybe what used to be just common industry knowledge in the past?
I think you said two things before I even answer that, but the fact that there's more software developers, that's growing every single year, and the majority of those are new to the industry. They've been in the workforce for less than 5 years. They're not getting. You can't say they're not getting the skills they need at university, but what you can say is they don't yet have the experience to understand that they might have learned these concepts, but it's truly what they need to do on a repeated basis, day in and day out. And so as they gain that experience, they gain that confidence, and then they know how to implement it. But a lot of times when you remove yourself from that city setting of sorts, who do you go to talk and listen to about those concepts? And you need to find industry experts that are writing about this, industry experts that are talking about it, individuals who don't have messages that are all over the place, but they're truly focused on, that DevOps concept. And I like what you've done, Jeffrey, in your book, .NET DevOps for Azure. It breaks it down. It's simple. I had the chance to be on one of your webinars earlier last week, and breaking it down to the 7 must-have capabilities. Those things don't change, and you have a great way of really conveying what needs to happen for each of those capabilities, what it looks like, and translating it into something people can take back to their desktop and implement it.
One of the names that come to mind as you mentioned people who are writing about this is Capers Jones, that I know of. He's probably the most prolific analyst of software industry research, and he just publishes a lot about the different trends, and he goes decade by decade. I think he has his research analysis going back 6 decades, and I've learned just a ton from his writings. And then I remember reading The Mythical Man Month by Fred Brooks when I was going through college, but he's written so many other essays as well. One of them is called The Tar Pit, and anybody who's trudging through trying to make changes to a legacy system, this essay is for you, because yes, it is the tar pit and what causes it. And then I also remember whatever happened to the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge. That was all over the place in the 90s. I'm wondering if people just don't even read all of that stuff today, but there's a lot of useful concepts in there.
You date yourself, Jeffrey, when you go back, but that is your experience. But I like how you
hey, what do you do?
Yeah, that's where you gain the experience, wisdom and experience. But the fact that you've got publications and, individuals like Capers Jones, that you're still applying the same concepts that have existed. A lot of times we just have to kind of filter out all the new stuff that's being thrown at us and just get back to the basics.
Yeah. Well, awesome. As we wrap up here, are there any resources that you'd like to point the listeners to if they want to kind of dig into some of the things that we talked about?
Jeffrey, if I were to think of one resource that everyone really should go back and review, even scanning the table of contents of the project management body of knowledge, PMBOK set of standard terminology and guidelines for project management. It's going to come into play. Awesome.
That's going to be some nighttime reading for sure. That thing's huge. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much, Christina, for coming on to the show. This is a great conversation. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.